Hi YouTube, today I'm doing another work with me video. So this is a bit of an older footage from a video, from a piece last year, and also my pattern is a bit wonky, but if you have your own pattern it shouldn't be too much of an issue. So I have two front pieces, two front pocket lining pieces, two front pocket pieces, two back lower pieces, two back top pieces, two back pockets, 5 belt loops and 2 waistband pieces. So my first step, I'm going to pin my front pocket lining to my front pieces around the pocket edge. And after pinning that, I'm going to sew. After sewing, I make some snips around the corners, and I'm going to flip them inside out and pinning the fabric in place so that I have a nice finished edge. After that, I'm going to press the seam, and then I'm going to top stitch twice around the edge of the pocket in a contrasting color to make the pocket. Next, I'm going to take the front pocket pieces and pin them to the pocket lining at the bottom and the inner side and sew them. Making sure I don't catch the front pieces fabric. And my footage got iffy, so I sewed my 2 back lower pieces to my 2 back top pieces, and then I also took my belt loops and folded over the edges and sewed. When folding over the edges, like I'm doing with the back pockets, I'm running my nails across the fabric to make sure it turns nicely. You can also press the seams. What I didn't mention is I also made 2 rows of top stitching to my back pieces to make that nice and neat for the pieces I sewed together. And now I'm sewing along the edges of my back pockets and pinning them in place on my back pieces. And I tie quite hard to make them symmetrical, pinning them symmetrically onto the pants, onto the back pieces. Okay, and now we have 2 functioning back pockets. Next, I'm going to take my front and my back and good side to good side, pin along the edge, the hip side edge of my fabric, and then sew. So you can see here my fabric doesn't line up, and that's part of where my pattern is wonky. I should really update my pattern. Anyway, after I've sewn that, I pin my front pocket in place so that it doesn't move around, and then I'm going to pin my seam allowance, my side seam allowance to one side, and I'm going to top stitch twice with the contrasting thread color. And now we have my 2 pant legs. Now I'm going to line them up at the front crotch seam, and I'm going to only partially sew the front crotch seam so that it can open, so we can put it on the doll. And after sewing that up, I'm going to fold over the top edge and fold over, pin and sew, and then I'm going to sew that zipper part and then sew along the edge to make it nice and neat, and then sew the seam allowance flat on the crotch side. Okay, now we're going to, hopefully it shows better on the footage what I'm doing than what I'm saying. Now we're going to line up the back crotch pieces and sew that up. So now, after sewing that up, we're going to do the pant legs. Why I'm starting at the crotch? Well, it's because my pattern's wonky and my leg seams don't match up that well. So I'm pretty much going to be pinning my pants from the inner leg seam, and then I'm going to pin just before I'm at the bottom. I'm going to pin my pant legs seams of the edge, whatever you want to call it, up, and then sew. So you can see me struggling a bit for no good reason, because I haven't pinned up the inner leg seam yet. So first off, I have to make sure the inner leg seam needs to line up, and the leg seams, or both legs, are going to be the same length. So here you see me officially pinning up the inner leg seam, starting at the crotch, which is the center, and pinning my crotch seam allowance to the sides I want them, and then pinning down the leg seams down to the leg holes. And out the frame. Okay, so now I'm properly lining up my bottom hem, and now we're going down the other leg and comparing the two legs together to make sure they are symmetrical. So yeah, hopefully there's more than enough patterns for pants and leggings and jeans all around the internet, so you don't have to worry about my wonky pattern, but that's how I sorted it out. So after sewing the bottom hem of the pants, I finish pinning the legs and then sewing the inner leg seam. And after sewing that, I turn my pants inside out, which is a bit of a chore in this scale since the denim fabric is a bit thick. And after pinning my front pockets, because they're basically flapping all over the place at the moment. So now I'm taking my two waistband pieces and pinning them at the sides and sewing them. After that, I'm going to take my belt loops and pin them to the between my two waistband pieces at the center, and so on and so forth, making sure everything is at the correct distance away from each other. Anyway, I pin them in place, and then I'm going to sew along one edge of my waistband to sew the belt loops in place and close the seam, or close the waistband. I'm using my pins as a makeshift ruler to make sure they're even. So after sewing, I clip the corners and turn it inside out. Using pins, which I probably should be using something else, to turn the corners properly. And now I'm going to be pinning my belt loops around one side of the fabric, making sure the good sides is on top. And then I'm going to press the seams with my iron for my belt, waistband and my pants. You can see my pants look a bit wonky, lay a bit odd. That's also because of my wonky pattern. And after that, I'm going to pin my waistband to the rest of my pants, trying to make sure everything lines up properly. And neatly. So after sewing that, you can, if you want to, top stitch around the waistband like actual jeans fabric. But at this point, for my machine, the fabric is a bit thick and it's a bit, well, my machine can do it, can go for a thick fabric, but it doesn't look too nice. So I don't top stitch along the edge of the waistband. And after top stitching, I add snaps and a decorative button. Unfortunately, I don't have footage of that. And here's some old photos. I hope you enjoyed watching, and see you next time. Bye!